Hi, everybody. It's so great to be here. Thanks to Sportico. Awesome to kind of converge into the world of data-driven, personalized performance and training and how our own data can unlock our peak performance. Super excited to be with some incredible guests here, Kristen, Holmes, and Luke Collis, and they're going to introduce themselves in just a minute. But we are, this is just such an important topic because I think it continues to progress, and we think about not only the youth market, which we'll talk about, but also just the broader market of human performance and our own wellness and how we can start to get that agency over our bodies and minds. So we're at Drive by DraftKings very excited about this space in general and these two guests. So Kristen, you're first up. So why don't you introduce, Kristen is just, first of all, I will say she is, her most important job is she's a very special advisor to Drive by DraftKings. But in addition to that, she's just a world-class, before going to Whoop, a world-class athlete, 3-time All-American, 2-time Big Ten Athlete of the Year at Iowa State.
University of Iowa.
Okay, University of Iowa, close.
Big Ten.
An incredible coach at Princeton, one of the most winning coaches there, and then found her way to Whoop and is now doing groundbreaking work. So please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Meredith. And hello, everyone. It's a real honor to be here. Excited to talk about human performance. I've spent, as Meredith alluded to, I've spent my entire life in athletics. And currently, I'm the Vice President of Performance Science, Principal Scientist at Whoop. So I drive a lot of the research. So basically, I look at kind of the psychophysiological determinants of human performance. So I kind of investigate all kind of physiological things. So looking at training load and kind of circadian and sleep and recovery, markers of recovery, and how they might kind of impact human resilience. So a lot of my work is revolves around that now. I kind of made my way to Whoop because I was actually building similar technology at Princeton. So I was a very early adopter of technology. So I was, I think, the first NC2A coach to use heart rate variability in an applied way. So I've been deep inside these markers of recovery for a very, very long time, and realized quickly at Princeton that, there was no load that I could really put on my athletes that would allow me to predict next day recovery. So I really started digging into predictive analytics using heart rate derived technology to better understand, how my athletes were adapting to load. And what I realized really quickly was that it was actually the other 21 hours that they weren't with me that was actually more predictive of how they show up tomorrow. So it was really about how they were sleeping, their social connections, when they were going to bed, when they were waking up, how they were fueling, their hydration levels. So I really started tapping into kind of all these other kind of aspects of performance and created tons of really cool models, correlated those to measures of psychological well-being, and started to really kind of knit together, I think, a framework for, what are the behaviors that really set us up to be able to consistently perform, not just one year, but year after year. And we won 12 Ivy League championships in 13 years, and a national championship in a sport that really doesn't have any business doing that, in a league that doesn't have any business doing that. But it really comes down to availability. And that at the crux of, I think, this conversation, it's about how do we make athletes robust enough to show up every single day and train. If you can do that, you will win a shit ton of games. And most importantly, your athletes will thrive. So really that's been my life's work is around availability and using heart rate derived technology to kind of help facilitate that.
Amazing. So now Luke, also an incredible athlete, 7-year professional quarterback, and huge amount of experience just in this topic of coaching and performance, but was coached by world famous Tom House as well, so a student of the game. Give us a little bit more about your personal story and inspiration behind Mustard.
Yeah, thank you very much, first of all, and really appreciate being here. But I obviously played football and started played high school, played college, played professionally, and then got into business. But a lot of the lessons that I've taken into business and beyond have been from high school football. It amazes me every day. Probably a lot of people have that experience in the crowd. Like, oh yeah, I learned a ton playing high school sports and playing youth sports. And so that's really the thread that I've tried to carry on is how do we make youth sports more accessible? And I want to include the arts in there too, because I don't think everybody has to be an athlete. But how do we make those opportunities accessible? And so first, after professional football, I got into politics. I thought this is a great way to affect change. I said, this is great. I can align with candidates that have that same mission. Now I'm in business, and it's the same thing in business. And thanks for mentioning Dr. Tom House, because I worked with him for football throwing during my professional career, and he's got the same lens of things. He came to me, which was really the start of Mustard, and said, how do I take what I do with 3D biomechanical analysis and take that to everybody? How can we make sure that it's not just the super elite athletes that are getting this analysis, but how can anybody access it? So that's how we started Mustard. We took the type of 3D analysis that he did in his motion lab, and we've actually built it into a computer vision and AI application for baseball starting, but we're getting into other sports quickly after. And so, this vision is a reality in a lot of ways, and being able to see kids who otherwise would have stopped playing before the age of 13, and that's really what the Aspen Institute focuses on, is so many kids quit before the age of 13, mostly because they're not having fun. And a lot of the reason is they're getting their butts kicked because they don't have the elite coaching. And we're seeing some kids that would have been in that group actually getting better through our platform and being able to perform better. And that, to me, is the mission of things. How can we get this stuff that you're working on, that we're working on, and make it accessible to everybody? And how do we make the athletes of the future everybody, not just the elite few?
Oh, amazing. Okay, so let's pick it up right from there. The first topic we're going to dive into is just deep personalization of data. Oh, guys, hi over there. I didn't even, a whole group. So the personalization of data, this is kind of core, Luke, to your platform. So just access, personalization, how you're able through the platform to connect with the kids where they are, both in terms of, yes, we got to get out there, but then where they are in their development, how you're able to really differentiate between, what a 10-year-old might need, what a 15-year-old might need, and how that might be different than what an elite player might need in terms of their development pathway.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Really, the way we approach it is, first of all, Tom House had this incredible data set starting off, and that really is what led to us being able to develop all this technology. So he had this data set of Hall of Fame athletes, Nolan Ryan, Randy Johnson, Greg Maddux. These are all guys that he coached, which is insane. But then he started collecting data across sports. So, Tom Brady's, Drew Brees are actually guys he coached. Michael Jordan, he's got hitting a baseball in his data set. It's really insane. But then how do you take this elite data set and apply it to youth athletes? Is it the same thing? Is it different? And what we found was there are biomechanical imperatives that you have to hit in order to have elite mechanics. That doesn't mean that you need to look exactly the same or that you're going to move at the same velocities or anything as these elite athletes. But it does mean that in order to stay healthy, in order to throw harder, you hit those biomechanical imperatives. That being said, and I think what we'll talk about a little bit later, is they're not always going to have the functional strength that some of these elite athletes have. They're not always going to have the same habits that a lot of these elite athletes have, which is going to hold them back. And you need to be careful about different loads, like pitch counts and stuff like that. A little bit more on the personalization. For us, if you record a video through our application, we run you through Tom House's 10 key variables, and then we actually give you, here's the variables that you need to work on, but let's just have you focus on one for now. You're going to do those drills, and you're going to come back the next week and test again, and you'll probably have improved that variable by the next time you test. So that's how it works more functionally for us.
So if you're like good at one thing and not at the other, you're going to get a different sort of profile and mechanical metric and ultimately program for you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So, Tom House has a regression analysis of what variables are most important.
Yep.
And so you kind of just run through that regression analysis.
Awesome. Before we ask this question to Kristen as well, but have you seen differences then between like that might be at a, higher level, like, okay, generally we've got 10-year-olds are different than, the 15-year-olds. Have you been able to make any conclusions around big segment differences just from the data capture that you've done?
Yeah, it really is. And we just give users back an efficiency score.
Yep.
And that efficiency score, the average between each age group is like, it's close to like 10 points per like age group.
Yeah.
You just don't have control of your body at that age.
Yeah.
I was actually, I went out and threw with my friend's like 9-year-old son, and I was expecting something a lot different. I didn't really know what 9-year-olds threw like, and it was just so much different than even early high school. Your body's just moving so much differently at that age. So it's enormous.
Yeah, it's enormous.
Yeah.
So, okay, Kristen, to you now. Also, personalization of data is at the core of the platform. So I want you to be able to kind of speak to that. And then specifically, you've done like some groundbreaking work with women, and just thinking about differences and how you've been able to kind of zoom in there and really help the world to understand a little bit about how training programs have to be thought through differently for even the gender differences.
Yeah, I mean, machine learning is amazing, right? It's given us this incredible opportunity to deliver insights, in our case, about the body and how it's recovering and adapting in a way that's completely personalized. Every single piece of insight that's delivered on our platform is based on the individual's unique physiology and how the changes in heart rate and heart rate variability and how what's happening kind of in the moment and over time, I think gives the individual a really good sense of how their potential for performance, but also their how they're adapting to load and just life stressors in general. So just so folks know, Whoop is a 24/7 physiological monitoring device. So it's basically, heart rate data at a very high hertz. So just huge sampling rate. So we're collecting all sorts of heart rate data 24/7, and then we basically transform those insights into 3 different buckets. So one is the strain, that's like how hard your heart is working; recovery, how you're adapting to kind of stress; and then sleep. And then within that, there are prescriptions. So it's more than just, when we talk about personalization, it's more than just, what it is and why it matters, but actually how to manage it. And, as we look at population level data for talking about sex, obviously knowing that not all men, there are sex differences, obviously, and so we're looking at it just if you identify as a male and you identify a female on our platform, we're able to look at those data, and clearly, women have who naturally menstruate, who menstruate or are not on hormonal birth control, look very different than women who are on hormonal birth control. There's just very distinct amplitude changes that are reflected in markers like heart rate and heart rate variability. As a result, we start to look at, what does recovery look like during these phases of the menstrual cycle when, or the different phases of the menstrual cycle. And for folks who might not know, the menstrual cycle is broken up into kind of two different phases: the follicular phase, which is the menses and ovulation, and the luteal phase, which is kind of the next 2 weeks. And the luteal phase, you have high hormones, your body is working really, really hard. As a result, your hormones are also high. So your capacity to adapt to load is a little bit different. And it doesn't mean you can't train hard and you can't PR. Of course you can. But the modalities and the considerations during that time frame are slightly different for women who, again, are naturally cycling. And then during ovulation, during menses and ovulation, that's when women's hormone levels are lower and they're really, really primed to take on heavy volume, heavy intensity. So those are times where you can make a lot of gains. Your body is just more primed to adapt to load. So just and this is, we were really at the forefront of discovering a lot of this and have a couple papers that we've published on, which is really exciting. But I think I think at the core of all of this personalization, it's just understanding your body. The science is so good right now. We don't have to guess anymore, right? And by understanding how our body is adapting to stress, and then understanding what behaviors are, putting deposit in our bank accounts as opposed to withdrawing, and being able to really narrow down, okay, what's helpful for me, and what is enabling me to show up and live my values in a way that feels good to me. People now, I think, have more insight into that, right? So they, you can spend more time doing the things that you really love and less time thinking about, okay, is this thing good for me or not? We don't have to guess anymore.
Amazing. Yeah. So let's pick up on that and move to the ability to action on the data. One thing that we hear a lot about is, it's now we do have a ton of data. Data is all around us. That data can be overwhelming. It's like, well, now what do I do? And so let's pick up on that and actually bring into the conversation, as every conversation requires, AI. So AI has the application of machine learning in particular gives us the ability to go from a diagnostic look, how am I doing? Check engine light, to then a potentially predictive layer. Well, if you keep doing what you're doing, you are going to be in the danger zone. Right. And this is where the conversation around longevity comes in. And I could be in the danger zone tomorrow, but I also could be working my way to a danger zone that is a shorter life than I want. Then that moves from the predictive layer to a prescriptive layer, right? Which is okay, so if you don't want to be in the danger zone, here's what you do differently. So it'd be really interesting to hear from both of you around how your respective platforms are moving us from here's how you are to here's what you should do. Luke, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. So, first of all, prescription is so key, and I think that's one thing that both our platforms really have in common, and know are significant is prescription. And so, obviously, with us, we're dealing with more. Here's how your body should move. Here's how it should move mechanically. In some of our functional strength stuff, it's here's where you need to get more efficient with your movements or your muscle mass or your flexibility. But that first part is just here's what to do. Here's some drills. Here's some exercises, so on and so forth. And that's really powerful. Now, the next part is you need to understand that that's practice, right? When you're working on your mechanics, you need to understand that you're just practicing for the game. And then when the game actually comes, you can't think about any of that. you just have to perform. And you have to be in the zone. And I think Whoop, especially with the HRV data, can help teach people how to get into the zone and be in flow. Certainly with the founding of our company and Jason Goldsmith, that's something we really hold dear and we try to teach through content. But any of the mechanics data, anything that we could throw at you, at the end of the day, when it's time to perform, you need to go perform.
Right. So the computer vision, right, is picking up on your kind of mechanical place, right? So it's like, how are you doing? How well are you doing what you're doing, right? Giving you some kind of instruction then to sort of do it differently.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so question is like, how fine-tuned is that? Maybe just a teeny bit into the tech of like, how fine-tuned is that today? Where are you guys pushing it? So it's like, is it as fine-tuned as, you're pronating this way and it should be that way? And are you predicting injury if you don't? And are you prescribing corrective behavior?
So for right now today, we're tracking the 18 points on your body. We're looking at your whole movement, but we automatically segment into what's a pitch and what's not a pitch. So we know what's a throwing motion. We know when you're just walking to go pick up a baseball or like running or doing something else. So, we're able to tell that stuff. And then when you're actually throwing, and we collect all these movements throughout the course of the body, the pronation, everything, the different ratios between your angles. We really pick it all up and offer the prescriptions based on that. And that's pretty easy for us. The next steps are going to be picking up functional strength screenings. So like, okay, here's what you looked like doing a broad jump, doing a squat, doing, when you're running. And then from that, being able to offer functional strength exercises on top of that. Because once we recognize your broad jump, running, a few other exercises, then we can predict how hard you can throw, how hard you throw right now. And that's really powerful to an athlete, saying, oh, wait, my capacity is 98 miles per hour and I'm only throwing 76.
It's super interesting. So this is a bit of a crowdsourced question because several people asked me when I was letting them know I was going to do this panel, but are you able, for those parents out there looking at their kid, saying like, okay, I know you're in soccer today, or you're in hockey today, but your body mechanics and your future's really in basketball?
We cannot, sadly. So, but for a good reason. And yeah.
Mine are grown, by the way, so it's not for me.
No, but we can tell you, like I said, we can tell you how good you could get at this particular sport, or, what your capacity is. So from that, if you wanted to make your own decisions, we would let you. But no, it's not like this sport is meant for you, this one's not. We would tell you how to get better at one of them.
Yep. All right, to you.
Yeah. I think what's really special about the Whoop platform is that it gives you information daily about how you're recovering and adapting to stress. I've said that a couple times now. But I think where that's valuable is sometimes we can't perceive, or this is well documented in the literature, we cannot perceive our own cognitive and physical declines. It happens really insidiously and slowly. And I think that's where technology like Whoop is so valuable, that you don't get to a point where you're at a point of no return, right? You can start to see where you're not adapting very functionally, right? And that's expressed in Whoop recovery and in kind of your resting heart rate variability and your resting heart rate. Those metrics are really, really valuable when you look at them acutely and certainly over time. But, when you see a smallest worthwhile change in your data, it's time to change potentially your behavior. And you can, kind of very clearly see, okay, is this a product of emotional stress? Is this a product of just not getting enough restorative sleep? Is this a product of underfueling or overfueling? Is it dehydration? We're starting to be able to pinpoint these, because when you think about performance and you think about performing at, to your potential, there's not a gazillion things that really go into it, frankly. There's a few things on the psychological side that are really core. It's purpose, it's efficacy, and it's control. Boom. On the physiological side, it's your sleep, and there's sufficiency and consistency and quality, right, of your sleep, which we can quantify and measure, and it's the timing of things, so a lot of circadian factors, and it's how you're managing your recovery and your load, right? And I think that's another aspect that Whoop has just gotten so right, is that we help you understand your exertion, how hard you're working, and how you're recovering from that exertion. And your recovery is an indicator of, okay, I'm adapting well, I can push hard again today. Or you know what, I didn't adapt very well, I'm gonna reduce my volume and intensity slightly. And you can kind of, this acute kind of information just allows you to kind of troubleshoot and pivot before you get to a point where you're injured, right? Or you get sick. I haven't been sick since 2017. It's at this point, knock on wood, but we don't, and I know you're injured right now, so so I'm sorry about that. But I think I just, like I said, I think some of these insights, if you understand it and you're consistent, you can really control your physiology. And as a result, you can direct your thoughts and attention. It's really, I think the superpower of the 21st century is controlling your attention and your thoughts. There's no doubt about it. The path to that is via your physiology, right? And folks, I think, who don't understand that are missing, I think, a huge, huge opportunity and frankly, a competitive advantage, a survival advantage. So to me, that is the promise of this technology. It's control of your physiology so you can control and direct your thoughts in a way that's, meaningful to you.
Okay, and we're going to get into the thought piece in just a second. But before we do, two questions, somewhat unrelated, but one is, where are we as a society at the athlete level and at the coaching level in actually taking all this data now available that seems to be abundantly clear around, okay, do this, don't do that, and actually not doing this and not doing that? Meaning, do coaches actually hold their players back and who are injured or close to injured or not at peak performance potential, or do they not? And do athletes who are trained from the get-go to push through pain and push through challenge accept the data, or do they just plow through it? And where are you seeing us in this evolution?
I think that this is, I've been, I think at this point, inside pretty much every high performance environment from NBA, NHL, you name it, collegiate. And I would say, at the professional sporting level, I think that's where it's the toughest, it's the most challenging. The professional athlete has a lot of autonomy. They are super distrustful. And I think it's really hard because there's so much transition at the professional level. It's really hard to form trust. And I think this is really a conversation about trust, right? These are really intimate details about your behaviors and your physiology. There's a lot of money at stake. So it's really hard, I think, to create models that really enable a professional outfit to use these data to their fullest. Like, I can tell you, I can go into a professional environment. I just feel so confident that if I could have all that data and I could have access to those athletes, we would win championships. I just, because the data's so good, and
you have.
And I have, yeah. But I think the problem is that we don't have access to the athlete's data in the way that we really need. Like, the 24/7 picture, in order to do what you're talking about, really adapt volume and intensity in a super intentional way that keeps this athlete firing on all cylinders every single day of that season, we just don't have the access at the professional level. We don't. at the NC2A level, I've had full access to FSU, Florida State University, and women, way more compliant than men. I mean, we're talking 100% data across softball, soccer. We win. Like I mean, it was in there. Elisa Angeles she's the director of strength and conditioning at FSU. She is just phenomenal. The way she uses data, how she builds trust. I mean, she is just unreal. And these women, they thrive, and they don't get, very few injuries. And we are able to do a lot of predictive modeling there because we have all the data. We have the athletes allow us to have the data. We have external load data as well. We have subjective load, right? And obviously the internal load from Whoop. We put all that together and holy cow, like it is just magic, right? So the potential is there. The data is there. It's about trust and figuring out how do we work on these relationships.
Yeah, good topic for another panel. And
I know.
Data privacy and data ownership and trust. Yes. Do you want to jump in on that?
I'm happy to add to that. Yeah, because the physiological side, I think we're starting to get really good at. I mean, yeah, and so that data is all there. In terms of the repetitive movement piece of it, especially in baseball, it's probably where you see the most, and tennis, you see a tremendous amount of repetitive movement injuries. That's maybe where it's not quite so good because the stress that we're putting on elbows, the stress that we're putting on shoulders, I don't think is nearly as well understood as other pieces of it. And so adding in those variables to it, I think is really important. And not everyone's quite so agreed on the mechanical piece. I think that once people start to come to agreements on the mechanical piece and understand the stress that improper mechanics can have on your joints, the better off we'll be in some of those repetitive motion sports as well.
Right, and I think it leads to money, which also helps. That's where all this load management stuff is coming in. Is like, let's keep our players who are very expensive playing. Right.
NBA, I think, just put limits on.
Yes, they did. Yeah. Interesting.
Star players.
Knowing that we only have a few more minutes and a big topic yet to come is just about the sort of mental part of the game. So we've got movement analytics and we've got biometric tracking. We know that 90% of performance is mental, right? So how does this all come together as we think about getting to that next frontier, physiology and neurological kind of wiring and performance, emotional stress, mental health coming into the picture here? Where are we today on the tech? Where are we going? How do you guys help get us there?
Yeah, why don't you take the time?
Yeah, so a lot of my research is basically tying together the mind and the body. So I'm a psychophysiologist. So basically in all of the research that I do with the Army, with professional athletes, so I really investigate high stakes, high stress environments where we always have psychological measures, validated psychological measures running alongside the physiology. So we can start to see which behaviors correlate with psychological functioning, for example. So one of the findings in a U.S. Army study we did with special operations in Alaska, it was 1,000 paratroopers, and we basically looked at those data and we saw that sleep consistency, so the degree to which you stabilize when you go to bed and when you wake up, correlated, and we don't know causation or correlation, but they correlated very, very strongly, very significantly with all aspects of psychological functioning. So I think the story is, how do we take some of these quantifiable markers that help us understand the physiology and put the story together with how it actually correlates with the psychology? And that paper is published in Military Medicine in May. But I think at the end of the day, heart rate variability is an amazing proxy for not just physiological adaptation, but actually correlates more strongly with your psychological status. So, a very simple marker like heart rate variability, which has now been validated over and over again, you can really understand how someone is, how psychologically well they are, and you can pretty much guarantee that if someone is perceiving stress as really high and has, is anxious and, not feeling well mentally, or their mental health is suffering, you will see a suppression in heart rate variability before it maybe manifests in sleep. Sleep is the other really kind of golden nugget, right? Sleep architecture changes in a meaningful way. Just, how you'll have decreased REM onset latency, so you drop into REM faster, right, is very predictive of depression. So before you even have symptoms almost, or even before you can perceive it, that's actually a predictor of depression. So, there's just a wealth of insights in this biomarker data that help us understand your mental health.
And Kristen, where do you see it going? Like when you think about, I know you've done some work on just light and circadian rhythm, then there's the link between the brain and the gut. So there's some metabolic stuff that's on the frontier. Just thinking about like what else, as we start to complete the picture, do you see as important along with the HRV marker in general that might help us to even get a more fine-tuned look at this?
Yeah, so other integrations, you alluded to it. I mean, blood glucose data is so interesting. And actually we have a feature called the stress monitor. It's an algorithm that takes basically 24/7 heart rate variability and heart rate and gives you a kind of a insight into your stress on a scale of 0 to 3. And actually what we see correlate with stress is spikes in glucose, which is so interesting, right? So the algorithm basically, we did 2 years of research developing this algorithm. It's anything below kind of 3 METs, so very low level activity. So this is just me sitting here. I probably have a 2.2 kind of stress on a scale, again, of 0 to 3. If I'm really chill, relaxing, doing breath work, it's below 1. If I have a Coca-Cola, boom, 3. If I have a Prosecco, 3, and it takes 4 hours before I come back down to my baseline stress. So I think what's so exciting is that we're going to be able to, develop algorithms using just heart rate to really as a proxy for glucose potentially, right? And to better understand, kind of non-activity stress, right? Like what is that cognitive load over the course of the day? So, I'm so optimistic that, and I'm a science advisor to Levels, which is Levels Health, which is a glucose monitoring company, which I think there's just a ton of insight in CGM. And then, I think Tears, there's a gold mine of data. Munir Zak, I don't know if you guys know him, but he can talk days for Tears, around Tears. And there's other metabolites, I think, that are really exciting. But
Super fascinating. We also share your enthusiasm. Oh. I think you want to be into questions. Why don't you ask one? Is it on this topic? Okay. Just didn't know if you had another question. Fire away.
Fascinated listening to this, whether it's from my personal stance of a 57-year-old guy who's like, oh my God, I need what Kristen's about, or father of 4 boys, high school and college athletes. What you both are talking about sounds incredible. Now, I may be one of the few in the room that didn't know as deeply of what you're studying. I love that you're talking about FSU. I wrote you a note, Kristen, about Princeton. I wonder if Mitch and his team is on this path.
Mitch Henderson?
Yeah, he's a good friend.
I love him.
But I feel like what you're talking about, we're at the almost 2006, right before the iPhone came out. Because the world, if it gets a hold of what you're doing and you guys market it and operationalize it, you're talking about changing a bunch of different segments, right? You're talking about changing my colleagues who bounce around from what's healthy, what's not, the friends in college sports, or I have a buddy at the Kansas City Chiefs and wonder if he's even onto this.
Yeah, Holmes is an investor in Whoop.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So Mark Donovan, who's the
I've been to
president.
their facility. Yeah.
So, but what about marketing? I come from a marketing background. Are you guys a little bit in an echo chamber of people that all get it versus, you know how powerful parents are who are investing in their kids in youth sports, and that is endless resources for you if they know what's going on. And if you have programs that can iterate, like look what they're doing with Whoop or with Mustard, When's that happening? When's it rolling out on a much larger scale where you're like, oh my God, your child hasn't done Whoop yet?
Yeah, I just
Sure.
for a while.
Yeah. So, I mean, I like what you're talking about in terms of the marketing piece, and I'm excited for Kristen's opinion on it too. I don't know how much people understand how important mental performance is, or if people do understand how important mental performance is. I don't think that they necessarily like act on it. You know, people might be, oh, mental performance is super important. Doesn't mean they meditate every day.
You're right. When I worked at MTV for like 20 years, and one of the things we saw with mental health is this could be the first generation coming through that looks at mental health as aspiration versus a stigma. So I think you guys have an incredible opportunity because everybody wants a leg up, right? You go to the AAU games or you go around the country on any sport level that's at that level, everybody wants the leg up. And I feel like with the right marketing and the right partners for you guys, all of a sudden people are just, of course I'm doing that, instead of what is it?
Right.
The leg up is sleep, just to be really clear. It's a natural, the biggest performance enhancer. Yeah, I mean, my kids are so dialed in on sleep. They keep their phones out of the rooms. They stabilize when they go to bed and when they wake up. They're like as dialed in as they could be. They know that that's the keys to the kingdom. Marketing, Jack Taylor is getting nervous because he's like, oh my God, Kristen's going to talk about marketing. I don't know anything about marketing. But I will say our fastest growing segment are kids, which is super, super exciting. We can help. I mean, I think in what I see and I think why we've been so successful in the collegiate space and with professional athletes, frankly, is when you get to see the repercussions of your behaviors so directly and so acutely, it really does modify behaviors. You know, alcohol consumption on our platform decreases 89%. I mean, there are so many folks on our platform just like, I'm not going to drink anymore because it just crushes your HRV, your resting heart rate, your next day recovery. Yeah. It is depressing. No more Prosecco. Yeah, no, I literally, I'm like, once a month I'll have like my one Prosecco, and during the day, like not before my sleep. Right. But yeah, it's crushing.
Okay. I know that everybody's heart rate's up because this has been a very thrilling panel. And I wish it could last longer, but I know we're getting the time to end. So thank you so much. Amazing. We can't wait to continue the conversation. We're excited at Drive to do that. Obviously invested in Whoop and so admiring.
Love you, Meredith.
Of you. Thank you so much, and thanks for being such great listeners.
Thank you. Thank you, Meredith. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you.